Week 1 is upon us, and I got my running back tier list ready to go. Top 36 running back rankings in order of who I would start, who I would sit. This year, we're doing things a little bit differently. We're using Flock Fantasy to do this. Starting next week, you'll be able to see the players' names in the tier list view, their opponents, some other information. I'll be able to click into them. It'll be a lot better. The devs are working hard behind the scene over on Flock Fantasy to make that happen. But for now, I'm going to swap between this kind of list view where you guys can see all that information and the actual tier list itself so that everybody is on the same page here. So let's get started with the running back injury report because we do have a couple things that we want to go through, and we're going to be going through injuries before we get into the tier list every single week. And of course, there's timestamps along the scroll bar if you guys want to just skip through it. First off, we have Devon Achane, who was coming into the season injured, but he does carry no injury designation heading into Sunday's game versus Indianapolis. He practiced in a limited capacity on Wednesday and Thursday, and then was a full practice on Friday. No injury designation, not questionable, none of that stuff. And Jalen Wright actually is listed out with the injury that he was dealing with there. So it's going to be Devon Achane and then Ollie Gordon in his first NFL game. So I have Devon Achane ranked pretty highly as a result. Then we have Christian McCaffrey, and this is the biggest news probably in all of fantasy football right now, is this debacle with his calf. On Wednesday, he was a full participant in practice. Thursday, he was a limited participant, downgraded from Wednesday's practice. On Friday, he basically did a walkthrough with the team and spoke to the media saying that, hey, when I have the injury history that I do, sometimes when you don't practice, people blow things out of proportion. He says he feels great, but a lot of us have trust issues from last year when he said, I believe it was September 6th of 2024, that he was feeling great and the calf was a non-issue. And then, of course, we know what happened after that. Jordan Mason's a league winner. Christian McCaffrey only plays in a couple of games, and he was one of the biggest busts in fantasy. So for those of you guys that have Christian McCaffrey, keep monitoring the news. But as of right now, it appears that things may have been blown out of proportion. Things may be better than they initially seemed. But we'll keep monitoring the Christian McCaffrey situation as a result. Make sure Brian Robinson is rostered in your league, maybe even Isaac Orendo as well. Both Bears backups are listed questionable. But I am recording this Saturday morning, and we still do have Saturday's practice because on Monday, the way the practice schedule works, if you are playing Monday Night Football, you practice Thursday, Friday, Saturday instead of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll see what happens with Roschon Johnson and Kyle Menengai. If both are out or some of them are out, then DeAndre Swift probably gets an upgrade. And then a reminder in the Houston Texans backfield, Joe Mixon is on IR. So it'll be Nick Chubb, Damian Pierce, Woody Marks, some combination of those running backs in the first game. Let's get into the first tier of running backs, which is the elite RB1s, which I'm sure nobody has questions about starting or sitting. But to give you an idea of what we can expect out of Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and Derrick Henry, who are in this tier. I would have had Christian McCaffrey in this tier, but as of now, I've downgraded him. Given the injury, he probably will move back up here if there's no issues for the rest of the weekend. Bijan Robinson versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucs were 9th best in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. They've historically been a very good run defense, but this is a great game environment. A 47.5 point over-under, the over catching 9% of the steam versus the public bets, the fast-paced game environment that we have here. Both offenses should be able to move the ball. So even though it's a tough matchup on the ground, Bijan set to have a very good game in this one. Jahmyr Gibbs is my RB2 on the week. Another high-scoring game environment, same over-under of 47.5 points that Bijan's got, over catching the steam as well. Both offenses have major DVOA advantages. Lions offense versus the Packers defense, even though they added Micah Parsons, it was still a nice advantage for how good the Lions were last year. And then Green Bay Packers offense versus the Lions defense, of course, getting a lot healthier now with Hutchinson returning. Still great advantages for those offenses. Gibbs was the RB2 in points per game last year, so he is in your lineup. Saquon Barkley, of course, played on Thursday night, locked into the lineup there as RB3 in my rankings. He was an elite play, of course, because it was a great game environment. Decent performance with 18.4 PPR points. RB4 in my rankings closing out this tier is Derrick Henry versus the Buffalo Bills. Now, last year, Derrick Henry had 210 total yards against the Bills in week 4 of 2024. Bills' run defense is still a weakness of their defense, and it could be another Derrick Henry bonanza. But I would imagine Sean McDermott's going to have his guys rally and tackling because they don't want Derrick Henry getting going in this one. This game has the highest over-under on the slate at 50.5, and the DVOA advantage of Baltimore's offense versus Buffalo's defense, and Buffalo's offense versus Baltimore's defense is number 1 and number 2 on this slate respectively. So we are expecting quite a few points, which is why I have Derrick Henry, even in PPR formats, into this elite territory of running back. So that's the elite tier. You guys, again, can see kind of the stats that we're going to be able to pull up starting next week. Moving into the next tier of running backs, we have Devon Achane, Chase Brown, Alvin Kamara, Bucky Irving, Christian McCaffrey for now, Jonathan Taylor, and Kenneth Walker. This is kind of known as the RB1s tier, the A tier of running back plays this week. Devon Achane versus the Indianapolis Colts. Like I mentioned, he is not listed on the final injury report. He is in a great matchup. There is no Jalen Wright in this one. Ollie Gordon in his first NFL game. Devon Achane against the Colts last year averaged 5.1 yards per carry, and this is impressive knowing that Tua actually didn't play in that game. So it wasn't one of those games where Devon Achane went nuclear as a receiver and that kind of thing. So with Tua healthy, Devon Achane healthy, it should be a very good high-scoring game environment for him in PPR formats. Chase Brown, my RB6 on the week, versus the Cleveland Browns is a tougher matchup. They are 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position last year, but Cleveland is going to probably get passed all over because they were a very easy defense to pass the ball against. Chase, Higgins, Joe Burrow probably going to be able to do their thing. That's going to result in red zone opportunities for Chase Brown. And week 9 onward, as we know, Chase Brown wasn't a top 5 running back in fantasy and averaged 5.5 targets per game over that stretch. So we should see a good amount of fantasy production through the air from Chase Brown, even if he is inefficient on the ground. Running back 7 in my rankings is Alvin Kamara versus the Arizona Cardinals. They were a bottom 12 run defense in 2024, and Kamara has averaged 6+ targets per game since the beginning of 2024, and this game has the 3rd highest combined pace of play on the slate. So even though it's a little bit of a ho-hum game, Arizona Cardinals, New Orleans Saints, I do think that Kamara can probably get some things done on the ground and through the air. Spencer Rattler, when he was the starter last year, looked Kamara's way out of the backfield quite a bit. So I do think we could get a lot of great receiving usage, give him that high floor that I'm sure you guys drafted Alvin Kamara for. RB8 in my rankings is Bucky Irving. Again, same game environment as Bijan, so a lot of expected points in that Atlanta Falcons-Buccaneers game. It is a really tough matchup on the ground. The Atlanta Falcons were 6th against fantasy running backs last year, but he catches passes. Bucky Irving actually caught 7 passes the last time they played against the Atlanta Falcons, and this actually was before both of those Atlanta Falcons games were early in the season last year. So this was actually before he was the starting running back for Tampa Bay. It was mainly him and Rachaad White splitting work at that point in time. So it could be a good performance out of the backfield for Bucky Irving through the air. Again, Christian McCaffrey is ranked as my RB9 tentatively at this point in time. If he is proven to be healthy and no limitations, he will move up to my RB5 just behind Derrick Henry. Even if Christian McCaffrey does play, the Seahawks were a bottom 10 matchup for running backs, like I said, and this game only has a 43.5 point over-under. It's on the road in Seattle. The Sharps like the under in this game as well, so I can't imagine this will be like a fantasy scoring bonanza. It also looks like there might be some expected rain in this game, but Christian McCaffrey should be good to go and in your lineup, assuming he's healthy. Running back 10 for me is Jonathan Taylor versus the Miami Dolphins. They were 19th against fantasy running backs last season. Dolphins and Colts has some sneaky shootout potential. I actually really like all the fantasy assets in this game to potentially be pretty good options. Jonathan Taylor and the Colts do have a nice matchup on the ground. Going to be looking to see what this backfield split looks like because I do think DJ Giddens could be the receiving back, the 3rd down back for this team as soon as week 1. And Jonathan Taylor actually did have an 81% snap share, which was second only to Kyren Williams last season among fantasy running backs. So I do think if Giddens can prove to be a big part of this backfield, that could factor into Jonathan Taylor's workload. And with all of these guys, we don't have any information, any new data than we did before the NFL season when we were drafting our teams. Next week, we're going to go over in depth what the usage looked like, what the receiving touches and the routes and all that kind of stuff looked like. But for now, we're kind of just going off of what we thought of them preseason. Running back 11 closing out this year for me is Kenneth Walker. Same game as the Christian McCaffrey one, but he does have the better matchup of the 2 running backs. Kenneth Walker and the Seahawks are at home. The San Francisco 49ers did lose some pieces on defense. They were about a league average run defense last year. Let's see Walker look great and look healthy because in September, the month of September, the last 2 years, he averages 21 fantasy points per game at this position. Kenneth Walker has been really good getting out to fast starts. The problem for him has been come October, he's dealing with some kind of injury. So hopefully Kenneth Walker can stay on the field and stay healthy this season because he probably will be a great value for those of you guys that drafted him. Moving into the next tier running backs, we have the RB2s tier. We got Ashton Genty, Chuba Hubbard, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Kyren Williams, Amarian Hampton, and James Conner. With a lot of these guys, you're basically just betting on them having big performances, having big workloads, and that's why they're ranked where they are. With Ashton Genty, it is his first NFL game, and we did see on Friday Amarian Hampton kind of not look like he was 100% ready to be the lead back. So hopefully that doesn't translate over to Ashton Genty as well, because this is a really easy run defense matchup, or at least it was last year. They were bottom 3 against fantasy running backs. They beefed up the defense by hiring Mike Vrabel. They also added guys like Milton Williams up the middle. So I expect them to be a better run defense, but I would like to see why this guy was the 6th overall pick. Because, of course, as a prospect, he was exceptional. We saw a great workload, or we expect a great workload from him coming into this game. But I do want to see that, okay, this is why Ashton Genty is Ashton Genty. I want to see him break a long run. I want to see him look like a great receiver. I want to see him break some tackles, do those things that he was doing at Boise State. I don't want to see, the stat line we saw from Amari Hampton, for example, from Ashton Genty in this game against the New England Patriots. Chuba Hubbard, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he absolutely decimated when he played them last year. 47-point over-under in this game. Both defenses were really bad at everything, stopping the run, stopping the pass. Against running backs in 2024, the Jaguars were dead last in the NFL against stopping fantasy running backs. Chuba Hubbard in 2024 had a 77% snap share. As you guys can see that there. Is that in jeopardy this year? With Rico Dowdle coming in, who was very good for the Cowboys last year, with Trevor Etienne coming in, maybe takes away some third down work. Do we see that same level of dominant, running back touch share out of Chuba Hubbard, or is Rico Dowdle simply a backup? Trevor Etienne simply a special teamer? We'll have to wait and see there. Underdog has him set for 11.95 half PPR fantasy points. I like him to hit that total against the Jaguars. It should be an easy matchup for him. I think he can get to 100+ total yards, maybe score a touchdown or two in this game. So if you guys do want to make some picks over on Underdog, I'm going to be taking Chuba Hubbard higher than 11.95 fantasy points in half PPR. Running back 14 for me in my rankings is Josh Jacobs versus the Detroit Lions. Despite their injuries last year, the Lions were actually still very good against fantasy running backs. It's a 47.5-point over-under. Two of the best offenses in the NFC doing battle here. Josh Jacobs should be a lock probably to find the end zone in this game, given the high-scoring nature of it. But I do expect him probably to not be like averaging 7 yards per carry. I think the Lions will probably shut him down up the middle, but you got to hope he gets some receiving touches, finds the end zone, and that's kind of what you're hoping for out of Jacobs. If he had a better matchup, I'd have him a lot higher than this, but it is a little bit of a tougher matchup on the ground for him against the Lions. James Cook versus the Baltimore Ravens here. I just want pieces of this game, man. 50.5-point over-under. This Sunday Night Football premiere that we have for the 2025 season could be the game of the year, legitimately. Like, this could already be the game of the year in the first game of the season. Two of the biggest AFC contenders, in my opinion, the two teams that might meet in the AFC Championship against each other. James Cook got absolutely snuffed versus Baltimore last year, his worst fantasy performance of the season. And of course, we know what happened on the other side of the ball where Derrick Henry ran wild. I'm very curious to see, what does the snap share look like? What does the workload look like for James Cook after this contract extension? Because last year, 49% of the snaps is not a big workload. That's like RB3, RB2 type of usage for fantasy. But because he plays for Buffalo, obviously he has the opportunities to break long runs and score touchdowns and all that kind of thing. So if we get James Cook with like a 65, 70% opportunity share going forward, he might legitimately win people leagues and be a high-end RB1, mid-end RB1, given the strength of this offense. So James Cook's snap share and workload, the split with Ray Davis, the split with Josh Allen, of course, in the red zone, is something I'm going to be really paying attention to in that game. RB16 for me in my rankings is Kyren Williams versus the Houston Texans. They were the second best run defense against fantasy running backs last year, so this is a brutal matchup. I think all of us want to know about three things about Kyren Williams. Number one, can we get back to that 2023 efficiency that we saw? Because in his breakout season, he was very efficient. Rush yards over expected, yards per carry, all that kind of stuff. But last year, that efficiency tapered off a little bit. This game might be a good gauge of that, because if he has like a brutal stat line against the Texans, then we might be getting same old Kyren from 2024, which is, yes, workload is great, but he is probably not going to be the most efficient running back on the ground. But if he has a great game in this one, that would be good news for his efficiency going forward, and he would probably rise up my rankings. Is Matthew Stafford healthy? Also, I want to see him take some sacks, take some hits. Is he going to be, wincing every time he gets hit by Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter in this game? I don't want to see that. For Puka Nakua's sake, Kyren Williams' sake, Devontae Adams' sake, we need Matthew Stafford to be able to take some hits in this game. And then number three, how big is Kyren's workload going to be? Is he going to be the 88% snap share guy that he's been the last couple of years? Because that led all running backs in 2024, but we know that Corum is probably going to be better in his second year. Jarquez Hunter was brought in to add some juice to this backfield. Are they simply backups, or are they going to factor in a meaningful way? RB17 that locked into my rankings was Amari Hampton, who played yesterday on Friday Night Football in Brazil versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Keep in mind, the best run defense in the NFL last year. The best run defense in the NFL last year. 8.2 fantasy points stinks. In PPR, he should have been better than that. But what's good is 80% of the snaps, 61% of the routes, 89% of the running back touches. Najee Harris pretty much didn't do anything except for one carry and one target there. Will likely make for a great buy low candidate against, like I said, Kansas City's league best run defense from 2024. So while Amari Hampton wasn't great last night, if you guys played him, and I did in my home league, you probably should feel pretty good about the workload going forward. The one thing that you have to be maybe a little bit worried about is the fact that he did look like, he was just going to be a gap runner and that kind of thing. Some of the concerns I had for Amari Hampton coming out of UNC were, if it's not blocked up perfectly for him, how is he going to look? He's kind of like one of those boomer bust Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry runners where he's not going to make and create a whole lot, but if you block it up for him, great. He can house it. He can, make big plays happen, break tackles in space, that kind of thing. So Amari Hampton, again, keep in mind, he's going to be a guy who's a little bit more boomer bust, but I do think he should be just fine going forward. And then closing out this tier, I do have James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the New Orleans Saints. 25th ranked run defense last year. The Saints are a certified tire fire. They are a 7-point underdog in this game. We don't know how good their defense will be, and I will say it could be better than a lot of people think. We also don't know if Conner will return to his regularly scheduled 15 to 20 carries per game and a couple targets out of the backfield from 2024, or will Trey Benson eat into this workload a little bit more than we saw in 2024? So that's going to be something I'm watching. What does James Conner's snap share look like? What does his workload look like? Is Trey Benson a major part of this backfield? Next up, we move into the C tier of running backs. These guys are more just solid RB2s. We have Tony Pollard, Breece Hall, Trevion Henderson, Isaiah Pacheco, Aaron Jones, Jalen Warren, and DeAndre Swift. Tony Pollard's going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, that is a brutal matchup because for my money, that's the best defense in football. Not to mention, I think the Titans are going to have a really hard time moving the ball. Think about it. You're Cam Ward. It's your first NFL game. Calvin Ridley's going to get the Defensive Player of the Year shadowing him the entire game. So you're going to have a hard time moving the ball through the air. And of course, the Denver Broncos have multiple other first-team all-pro caliber playmakers on their defense. So I don't think that the Titans are going to score more than like 10 to 14 points in this game. So that's bad news for Tony Pollard. But good news for Tony Pollard is that he had a 68% snap share last year. From 2024, that will probably increase over this first 4 games of the season because Tajay Spears is out on IR with an injury there. So at Denver, rookie quarterback in his first game, definitely not a good high-scoring game environment, implied point total-wise for the Titans. But I do think the workload should be there. 20-plus touches are on the menu there for Tony Pollard. Even if he's not going to be overly efficient, he can probably get there strictly on volume, and maybe he finds the end zone. Maybe he's a little bit more efficient than I'm expecting. Moving into RB20, I got Breece Hall versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were 9th against fantasy running backs last year. I think one of the most intriguing storylines for us to follow, because I'm going to be doing the running back tier list every single week, is what does the Jets backfield look like? What does the workload split look like? How big a part of it is Braylon Allen in short yardage and in the red zone? How big a part of it is Isaiah Davis on third down, long down and distance type of stuff? Or is Breece Hall from years past, where he is basically the main running back, 75, 80+% of the opportunities? This matchup has the lowest over-under on the entire slate. Should be a heavy dose of the run from both teams, but the New York Jets definitely. My guess is that Breece Hall probably has like a 60% opportunity share in this game, 60% snap share, but in a bottom 10 matchup, that probably moves him down to an RB2 play as opposed to a mid RB1 or a high-end RB2 like he probably would have been in years past. We got to see what this workload looks like. RB21 in my rankings is Trevion Henderson, the rookie running back for the New England Patriots, versus the Las Vegas Raiders. They were bottom 12, bottom 13 defense against the fantasy running back position last year. Now, I will say I would put him higher than this, but this is simply week 1 brain here because I don't want to put a rookie in his first game where Ramondre Stevenson could be a part of this backfield into my lineup for him to get 10 touches. So I don't think that's going to be the most likely range of outcomes, but there's like a 20% chance that happens. So I just personally want to see what the workload split looks like between him and between Ramondre Stevenson before I play him over more proven guys with bigger workloads like a Tony Pollard, like a James Conner, like even a Breece Hall, who of course has workload questions of his own, but we know he's been, fantasy RB1 before, so I'm a little bit less concerned about it. We'll have a lot to certainly unpack about all of these backfields around the NFL going forward, but for week 1, I am probably going to be hesitantly not playing Trevion Henderson, but it is a great matchup, and he could absolutely have his coming out game, his breakout game. I just don't want to play him over better options. So he settles in at RB21 for me. I do think he's a decent play, but I don't want to go crazy overboard with the projection there. RB22 for me was Isaiah Pacheco, who locked into my rankings at RB22. Not a favorable backfield split for Pacheco, just a 51% snap share, 8 total opportunities, and that was the same as Kareem Hunt. Now, Pacheco managers, I'm going to talk you off the ledge a little bit because I'm sure a lot of you guys are very nervous right now because, having the snap share and the touch share that he had is not great. The one positive takeaway here is that the Chargers are as elite as the Chiefs against the run. They were 4th against fantasy running backs last year. His schedule after week 2 against the Eagles, and actually we saw Javonte Williams run just fine against them in week 1, it will open up. We'll have some better run defenses, some easier matchups for Isaiah Pacheco going forward. This game script, when they're dropping back to pass, not running the ball, they ran the ball 10 total times with their running backs between the entire backfield. That was a Kareem Hunt game script. That was, drop back, pass the football. Kareem Hunt's kind of the third down guy, which is definitely not great news for Isaiah Pacheco. I want to see what this backfield looks like when, 1, the Kansas City Chiefs are winning the game, which they probably will win a lot of games this year. And 2, I want to see what it looks like against an easier run defense. And also 3, it's not in Brazil, which usually results in like weird games and, weird usage and that kind of thing. So don't panic on Isaiah Pacheco. I'm not saying to buy low on him necessarily, but don't panic on Isaiah Pacheco yet. I do think things could, adjust itself in better game scripts. Running back 23 for me in my rankings, Aaron Jones versus the Chicago Bears. They were 29th against the run last year, so a very good matchup for him. Big time intrigue in this backfield. How involved is Jordan Mason? Bears were a run funnel defense last year. I'm curious if the philosophy has shifted because last year the Vikings very pass heavy. Sam Darnold dropped back to pass like crazy. But without Jordan Addison for the first 3 games, with the additions they made on the interior O-line, getting Christian Darrisaw back at left tackle, plus the trade for Jordan Mason, it seems like the plan is to run the football more this year than they did last year, specifically in the red zone, I would imagine, because they were very bad at running the ball in the red zone last year. So I do think Aaron Jones is a decent play. I think this could be a little bit of a grinded out type of game for the Vikings. Running back 24 for me in my rankings is Jaylen Warren versus the New York Jets. This expects, like I said, for Breece Hall to be a very run-heavy game script for both teams. Might legit be over by like 3:30 p.m. Eastern because I don't think there's going to be more than 25 pass attempts per team on either side of this game. Caleb Johnson's in his first game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a run funnel Jets defense. I actually really like Jaylen Warren as one of my must starts this week. I'm taking him on underdog to go higher than his 75.5 total yards, and he absolutely needs to be in your lineup because I do think given the game environment, they are probably going to pound the rock. I'm going to be doing just a 2-player pick'em for this video, just Jaylen Warren and Chuba Hubbard, like I said. Feel pretty good about it. If you guys want to tail it, of course, head to the pinned comment. Lots of promos live for week 1 over on Underdog, and of course, code FSE users can get a 50% deposit match up to $1,000 and a gimme pick to add into this entry. And if you don't like these picks, they got tons of other ones, as you guys can see on the screen there. Very excited to get going into these pick'ems in week 1. Didn't have a great Friday night. We missed narrowly on Amari and Hampton's rushing yards, but hoping to get off the mat in this one here. The final guy of this tier is DeAndre Swift versus the Minnesota Vikings. Both Roschon Johnson and Kyle Menengai are listed as questionable for now. Like I said, Swift will probably jump up even a little bit further than this if both of them or one of them is out for this game. Brutal matchup in a lower scoring game environment, 44-point over-under, and the Vikings defense are very good against the fantasy football running back position. So again, DeAndre Swift probably would be higher in my rankings if it wasn't for the bad matchup, and it's the first game, new scheme, young quarterback. I kind of want to see what it looks like for the Bears if I can help it. If I have better wide receiver flex options, I would rather not play DeAndre Swift. But if he has a big workload without those guys, you probably have to put him into your lineups. So moving into the next tier, we have the high-end RB3s / the good flex options. That's Tyrone Tracy, David Montgomery, Austin Eckler, J.K. Dobbins, and Travis Etienne. Tyrone Tracy versus the Washington Commanders. I'm very curious to see how this workload looks because Tyrone Tracy, of course, had a big workload last year, but they draft Cam Scatterbu. This also projects as a tight game. Both of the Commanders and Giants games last year came down to just a field goal. So even though the Commanders project as the much better team, I do think this game could be closer than people think. Maybe the Giants play from behind. If the Commanders get ahead early, we could see Tracy catch some passes. But regardless, the workload is definitely big enough for Tracy to be a very good option in your lineup. Running back 27 for me is David Montgomery versus the Green Bay Packers, potentially high-scoring game. They no longer have Kenny Clark up the middle of the defense, which is good news for David Montgomery because that's primarily where he does his damage, especially in the red zone. And in a division rival game, David Montgomery usually does find the end zone in those ones because they're usually grinded out type of performances. Running back 28 for me is Austin Eckler versus the New York Giants. Eckler was listed as the starting running back, so knowing that Bill and Chris Rodriguez are going to be factors in this backfield, I kind of am hesitant to start any Commanders running backs, but it is a great matchup, and Eckler was listed as the starter. So I'm going to roll with Eckler if I have to go with one of these running backs. The Giants were actually brutal against the run last year, despite having Dexter Lawrence up the middle. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and of course they have Abdul Carter now coming into the fold. They'll probably be more stout against the run this year if I had to guess, but they were bad against the run last year. So we'll see what happens in this game. I do think Austin Eckler can catch some passes at the very least. Running back 29 for me in my rankings is J.K. Dobbins, who as of right now is the starting running back for the Denver Broncos versus the Tennessee Titans in this one. They're like 9-point favorites, and Denver should be able to run the ball against the 26th ranked defense against the run in Tennessee last year. How long does it last? Where J.K. Dobbins is the starter. What does it look like when he is the starter? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? We have no idea. For now, I would not put R.J. Harvey into your lineup because I do think he isn't startable until we know what this workload split looks like. And if I had to start one of them, it would be J.K. Dobbins. Like I said, 9-point home favorites versus a run funnel defense. Seems very tasty for a good matchup there for J.K. Dobbins. And then closing out this tier, I have Travis Etienne versus the Carolina Panthers. They were gutted by injuries on their run defense last year. Consistently, it was a cupcake of a matchup. I want to rank the Jaguars running backs higher, but the uncertainty of this backfield, whether it's going to be Etienne or Bigsby and how involved is Tootin, that makes them all like flex plays. Etienne would be my preference because I think this game could be high scoring and he's the one who catches passes, and I play primarily in PPR leagues. He would be my preference of the two, but Tank Bigsby is going to be followed shortly behind him. Moving down to the E tier, we have Javonte Williams, Nick Chubb, Tank Bigsby, Jerome Ford, R.J. Harvey, and Bill Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Javonte Williams locked into my running back rankings at RB31. In hindsight, this looks stupid because, of course, he scored 2 touchdowns on Thursday Night Football. And to be fair, I did not think he would get 77% of the snaps, 77% of the routes, and score twice on the ground. So he's probably going to be a guy, if he keeps playing like this, who is closer to the RB2 territory on a week-over-week basis. He has to be a riser from week 1 for sure because that workload was absolutely undeniable. Even though Miles Sanders is the one that looked like he had more juice, he broke the long run. I do think that Javonte Williams is probably the starter in this backfield, especially knowing that Jaden Blue was a healthy scratch in this game. Javonte Williams has a monopoly on third down. He is, of course, a great pass protector. He's going to get the routes, and that in the Dallas Cowboys offense is the important role when you think about it, because if he's going to be the red zone guy and he's going to get the routes and the targets, that is absolutely worthy of RB2 type of production. I'm not going to go crazy on Javonte Williams, moving him way up my rankings, but I do think this was a bullish game from him against one of the better run defenses in the NFL in the Philadelphia Eagles. Running back 32 in my rankings, Nick Chubb versus the Los Angeles Rams. Hesitant to rank him higher than this because I do want to see how Dameon Pierce and how Woody Marks are a part of this backfield without Joe Mixon. And it's a pretty decent matchup, but Nick Chubb didn't look great last year, so I don't want to go crazy ranking him higher than this either. Running back 33, Tank Bigsby. Like I said, Carolina Panthers really bad against the run last year. This could be a Tank Bigsby game because they're bad up the middle against the run, and Tank Bigsby does his damage there. Another one of these backfields, though, like I said, I want to see what the workload split looks like first before I'm throwing Travis into my lineup, before I'm throwing Tank into my lineup willy-nilly. Jerome Ford is my RB34 on the week versus the Cincinnati Bengals. They were a top 15 run defense last year. Judkins was just signed. So this is the big wrinkle in this backfield. We don't know what was going to happen if Judkins wasn't signed. And now that he is signed, he is expected to be out for week 1. We are going to see this backfield probably develop in the way that Judkins becomes the starter. But they could still suspend him. They could put him on the exempt list. We have no idea. It's good for my Judkins bags in best ball. It's good for Nathan's mental health in the Flock League. But he isn't expected to play this week. So this week, Jerome Ford would be my preference of the 2 running backs because he's the veteran. I do think his projection probably outweighs that of Dylan Sampson, but I do have Dylan Sampson 3 spots behind him, so I think both of them are maybe viable flexes in a pinch. The proven pass catcher and the proven pass protector in a game script where they're probably going to lose against the Cincinnati Bengals, who can score points on the other side. Jerome Ford is my preference, like I said, of the 2 running backs, but I'm not really excited to start any of the Browns running backs if I can help it. Running back 35 for me in my rankings is R.J. Harvey. So even though Dobbins is the one I have ranked higher, the game script may dictate that both of these guys touch the ball a lot because they are 9-point home favorites against a rookie quarterback making his first start. Running back 36, closing out this video, is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, aka Bill. Great matchup versus the Giants. Like I said, I assume Austin Eckler is the lead back, but in case Bill leads this backfield, again, Chris Rodriguez even potentially could be a factor. He is a fine upside flex position. So those are my top 36 running backs. You guys can see them on the screen there. Full rankings are available on flockfantasy.com. Again, use code FSE to get started. If you get the season pass right now, it'll cover you for full weekly rankings every single week. Start sit manifesto with all the matchup information that you guys would need to start your lineups. Tons more. You get to use the rest of season rankings, of course, as they get updated throughout the season. Trade calculator, my team's feature. You also get vouchers to ask us questions on the site. The link below in the pinned comment to get started with that. And again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this video should be a lot more bells and whistles going forward because the devs are working hard behind the scenes to make sure that this tier list format that you guys are so accustomed to has the matchups on the screen, has the players' names on the screen, has it clickable so that I can pull up stats on the spot there. I know it's the devs' top priority to get this done for me and for Mason and Danny for us to use. Leave any suggestions of what you guys want to see in the comments. We will have player names, matchup information. I can click into the game logs to pull stats. Like I said, it will be much more valuable, much better, much more seamless in future videos than it is in today's video. But thankfully, we don't have a lot of usage to talk about, don't have a lot of stats to talk about because we are just waiting for the season to begin. So it got us by today. Tail the pick'em entry too. If you guys do want to tail that, make your own in the pick'em lobby. You guys can see all the pick'ems going across the screen right now. Make sure to use the promo code FSE at sign up and first deposit. You'll get up to $1,000 in bonus cash on the site to play with. And you will also have a gimme pick in your pick'em lobby, both linked down below in the description. But with that being said, like the video if you enjoy, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. Peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.